So, hello everyone. Thank you for joining our Edcite Schools webinar. My name is Julia Sweeney, and I am our Director of Sales. So, I will be presenting about our Edcite Schools platform today.
And I'm Nicole. I work with our current Edcite schools and districts. So I'm very excited to be part of the webinar today.
Yes. So, we'll go ahead and turn off the camera now and get to the good stuff, which is the demo. So, let's get that going. So, today we're going to talk about Edcite Schools with the whole purpose of the platform being that assessment should drive learning. Assessment should drive growth for students, teachers, and your schools. Um, and one of our big things is that we are a state aligned assessment platform with a ton of teachers using and building every day. So, assessments for learning, state aligned, teacher approved. But when we think about assessments for learning, what does that mean Edcite Schools does? A lot of you are going to be familiar with Edcite, which you will know is a digital assessment platform. But what's the difference between Edcite and Edcite Schools? So, Edcite Schools really improves that assessment for learning process by making sure that your assessments are more aligned to your needs and that your data is even more actionable. And when we're talking about aligned assessments, we're talking about a few different things. We're talking about the types of technology enhanced items you have in order to meet the needs of K through 12 of all subjects. So if you need to have a fraction based question for some of your early elementary school students versus graphing quadratic functions for your advanced math at high school, that you've got the range of tech enhanced items to really measure those skills. We also want to make sure that those tech enhanced items are the same that you're going to be seeing on those state tests. So students need to feel comfortable showing what they know. They're doing all this wonderful learning throughout the school year. And then that data sometimes doesn't reflect the wonderful learning that happened because the technology enhanced items were unfamiliar and I didn't know how to drag and drop. I didn't know how to highlight text. So, providing aligned assessments with tech enhanced items is really important. We also talk about assessment tools, whether that is your text to speech, whether it's how you're accessing the assessment. So, using that code to access the test, whether it's your calculators, your notepad, all of the different tools and test navigation we need students to feel comfortable with. And so, you know, I want to actually show you how Edcite Schools does those aligned assessments. So if we start with those technology enhanced items, I'm going to toggle over to our create questions page. Now, a lot of people that have already been using Edcite extensively are going to be familiar with what it's like to create questions on Edcite, but I just want to do a quick run through of the types of questions you're going to find because Edcite and Edcite Schools offers your team more question types than any other platform you're going to find. So I like to think of question types in terms of what is the student action that is happening. So if we're thinking about, oh, I want students to select an answer versus I want them to graph an answer, or if I want them to do an image based question. I can also toggle over to the test alignment and view question types that align directly with my state test. But for this demo, I'm really focusing on student action since we've got a range of states watching this. And so let's say I'm looking at graphing questions. And let's say I need to have students build an array. We'll just go with this one because it's selected. Question creation on Edcite is super easy. So you're going to be able to easily create those aligned questions or just question types to meet the range of skills that we teach in K through 12. So when I create a question, I can very quickly add my directions. So on all of the state assessments, we always have like directions at the top, like please read the word problem and answer the question. And maybe the word problem is Nicole is having a birthday party with 25 guests. Uh, each table has 5 cupcakes. So I can dot, dot, dot. We can assume that I would write a really great word problem. Maybe I would add in a video directly from YouTube or an audio clip or a picture. But let's say that this word problem looks good. Then I could ask students to, use this technology enhanced item to create an array of cupcakes for the guests at the party. And I would be more explicit. We'd have a better word problem there. But let's say I want them to build an array of 5 cupcakes for 5 tables. And so I could go in here, I could change this image to be, let's say I wanted to insert something from my computer, but I'll just go in the library. Let's make this a cupcake. Select image. Great. I'm going to make this 25. So then this is going to require them to do 5 rows of 5 cupcakes. Great. I'm done. And so I can tag this to standards. If I were making an ELA question, I could add a rubric. And with Edcite schools, I'm able to give a common rubric for all of our ELA teachers to use or all of our math teachers to use if it's for some of our word problems. But let's say I was going to give this as is. My student view, it builds this super quickly. Students are able to build the questions, check answer, and they get that feedback immediately, and teachers are getting data in real time. And so, that is just to kind of ground us in this idea of how easy it is to create content on Edcite. And so when we're talking about Edcite schools giving you the ability to align your assessments, whether they be your benchmark assessments, maybe you're transitioning from using Google Forms, or you guys have been paper pencil, or you've got an LMS that doesn't quite have the range of technology enhanced items that you want, Edcite Schools is going to give you that functionality. But then if we're thinking about not just the items, but the individual tools and the test navigation, I want to show you, a full assessment from a student perspective, really tying in tools and navigation. And so one of the big distinguishers from Edcite to Edcite Schools is that Edcite Schools gives you access to a state aligned viewer. And so what that means is that if you are in a park state, we will reformat the page to look and feel like that park test. If you are in, Missouri, where you've got, a different assessment for your elementary students than you do for your high school students, we have the capability to make it look and feel like that state test for the relevant grade level. So just to kind of showcase that, I'm going to go in as my lovely demo, Cedric Diggory. And let's say that this school, Hogwarts, decided to give a common assessment. They are, let's say, in Ohio. So they use an air test. And so they want to have that air look and feel. And so you're able to align the experience even from the way that students access the assessment. So I can direct students to click Start Assessment up here, and it's going to take them to the access code, which is very similar to what they're going to see at that end of your state test. I should be able to enter my test code, go on in and get started. So if I go in here, and let's say my test code is BLHTA, opening assessment, you're going to notice, so this is a potions quiz, of course, because this is a Hogwarts school. You're going to see that look and feel is very similar to what students, well, this is what it looks like on the end of your state test. So I press start assignment, and this was clearly like my quick demo. But what's nice is that this gives you an example that even the tools in terms of text to speech align with that AIR test. If I need students to get comfortable with the notepad, the masking tool, or the grading rubric for this question. Yeah. So if I want them to like be able to open the notepad over here, even just like what I was doing there. And I'm like, oh, I want to make sure I know what these buttons are. So I'm not spending valuable time on that during that end of year state test. So again, with Edcite schools, you've got the option to do the text to speech. You've got the option to do that assessment code at the beginning, but still maintain whatever content you want. So, like in that demo, you will have noticed like we had a Venn diagram, which isn't actually a question type that appears on the AIR test, but it's one of the question types that a teacher could build, and it's still giving students practice with that drag and drop. But to really hone in on the exact alignment to the state test, I want to highlight our common assessment initiatives, which are the released state tests from various states presented in their state test viewer. So real quick, I'll show Ohio so you can kind of see. So if I look at an ELA assessment, and let's say I open up grade 5 ELA, you're going to notice it has that look and feel. I can start the assignment. I've got my passage on the left, my questions on the right. And again, this is the released state test. So they do have multiple choice at the beginning. These aren't all tech enhanced items. And so I can go through and I can give the released state assessments on Edcite so I get back data. And we're going to transition into talking about actionable data next. But this is just to show you that the alignment is pretty awesome. And we've also got the content for the different states. And just for teams that are not in Ohio, here's an example of like our Massachusetts Common Assessment Initiative. So if we look at a math question, these would be so it Massachusetts does the MCAS assessment. So these are the released MCAS tests, but you're going to notice that the test provider for Massachusetts is going to have that park look and feel. So whether you're in Illinois, whether you're in Maryland or Massachusetts, New Jersey, the we've got the park like viewer or the MCAS like viewer to make sure that you can get students familiar with that top navigation. So you'll notice the difference between, this Ohio test versus this MCAS test, the navigation is very different. If we're looking at Missouri, you can see that for, grade 4, they've got one assessment here. So I can click start assessment, and we've got all of the different question types. Again, their navigation is different. So I can toggle over to the next question. And then if I'm looking at the high school level, I'm going to see a totally different navigation. And so for like nationwide, we've got all of the different state assessments that you're going to find. So regardless of if I'm not showing your state as an example, don't worry. Like we've got the state test viewers to make sure that we meet the needs across the country. Okay, so again, this is really talking about how Edcite Schools gives you the most aligned experience so you can make sure that when students take that end of year state test, it looks and feels, like they've been practicing all year. It's no longer an audit on technology skills. It's second nature. I know how to navigate this. And not just talking about aligning to the state, but also making sure that you have the tech enhanced items to really meaningfully assess K through 12 all subjects. Being able to embed multimedia, being able to embed science simulations, being able to have recording question types for some of your language acquisition classes. That's a big one. That's a question type that is only available on Edcite schools, being able to have students record their answers. Um, so again, the aligned assessments is a big piece of having, assessments for learning across your school or district. Now, when we start thinking about what we do with assessments, really we should be prompting an action at every level. If I'm a student, feedback should be constructive in that I know, where I went wrong and what I should do better. And the same applies for teachers, school leaders, district leaders. And so with EdSite schools, you've got real time feedback, you've got feedback for over time, so, for that continued progress monitoring. And it should really be prompting actions, whether you're identifying, oh, this is a question type with a real technology barrier, or oh, I'm going to go ahead and remediate by differentiating content and sending to students that are struggling with this misconception. So, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have us actually look at some of the reports that come with EdSite schools. And again, this is a demo, so there is no real data in here. We take the privacy pledge, we follow all privacy obligations. Um, so if I'm looking, and let's look at from again a teacher perspective. So let me toggle back over to that, my demo account. So when I'm looking as a teacher at some data, let's say I'm looking at quiz 1, unit 1. The first thing I get to see in terms of reports is real time information. So I can see as students are progressing through through the assessment, which question number they're on and whether they are getting them correct or incorrect. You're going to notice the page refreshes every few seconds because this is checking the assessment in real time. Um, what's nice is that this is going to prompt teachers to respond when a problem arises as opposed to waiting for the next day. So if I notice on a formative assessment, let's say this is just like a check for understanding, that everyone is getting red bubbles here, then I don't need to wait until tomorrow to start addressing and reteaching. I can go ahead and pause and start reteaching right then. If this is a higher stakes assessment, let's say this is a district wide benchmark, administrators are allowed to turn this page to proctor mode. So teachers do not see whether students are getting it correct or incorrect. They just see which questions students are on to make sure students are getting through it. So the real time data is nice for that in the moment response, and making sure students are getting through the assessment or reteaching when necessary. And then what's cool about reports on EdSite schools is that from the live progress, we suggest some basic reports to follow. So I'm going to go through these pretty quickly and then highlight all of the reports that are available. So once I do my live progress, I can toggle over to do my grading. What's great about using digital assessments is that most of your questions are going to be auto graded. So for example, in this demo, all of the questions were technology enhanced items that had a correct answer. So the computer grades it all for me. If, let's say, I had an essay based question, I'd be able to go in here and grade by question and grade everyone's essay. And again, I can grade that on a rubric. This summary report is going to give you that quick look. I can see data very quickly by overall, by question, or by standard, and I can view that in percent or points. And it's really easy to pull that data out, whether you're exporting or copying to clipboard. Now, when I'm looking at these additional 3 reports, these are reports that only come with EdSite schools. And so if I look, let's say, at the dynamic report, this is really nice when I've got multiple classes, so I can see, what's the distribution of my lowest performing students, and it's going to show me how many are in each class. I'm also able to filter by particular subgroups and create a student group to start to send them targeted content. So this one's just a dynamic report to look at data and visualize it really quickly. The item analysis is actually my favorite report because it allows teachers to delve into those misconceptions and not just identify, oh, this class is having a misconception, but see which students are struggling with which misconceptions. So if I know that A maybe is the student is confusing setting and theme, I can go ahead and reteach these two students. So I could say, okay, for these two students, I'm going to create a student group, and this group is going to be reteaching theme. And maybe I want to like name it after my last name. I can go ahead and create that group and add students, and I can start to send content just to student groups. And that is a workflow that only exists on Edcite schools. And so it's really nice for that intervention, that differentiation, being able to send targeted content to student groups. What's also nice is that if I were looking at this, I'll show this from the district level, I'd be able to see, misconceptions maybe across our district or our school. But most often I see item analysis being most helpful at the teacher or teaching team level, where a grade level might be running intervention and I'm taking students that are confusing numerators and denominators. You're going to take students that were confusing the parts about multiplying fractions. And so it's nice to just be able to pull that data super quickly. And we've actually got one district, they're doing this really cool rollout where every single day their teams are doing a park prep question in the morning. And then in the afternoon, they're doing remediation groups based on what students selected on that single morning question. And then we've got a performance band report, which is going to give teachers a view by class or by student. And you can see the number of students in each proficiency for a particular standard. So if I, let's say, just wanted to look at this standard, I can see that I've got, you know, 0 students at below basic, 2 students at basic, 4 at proficient, and 2 at advanced. And again, those are clickable, so I can view the students in that group, start to target them. And you have full control over the performance bands. So if your team uses, let's say, 3 performance bands or 4 or 5, you can go ahead and edit those, and you can even change the colors associated. So I can say, oh, I want, there to be just 3, and I want to change the colors to be whatever colors I want. Now, these again are just the reports to get people started. Once your teams are more comfortable, they're going to be able to delve in and see data. We just have a lot of reports. So if I'm looking at the student level and I want to see standards mastery, I can go in here and let's see if I select a student, like this would be great for a parent teacher conference. I've got a breakdown of their mastery level by standard and which questions students have answered to give me that mastery level. I can see their performance on assignments over time, and I can just see like overall information about students. The Reports Hub is also going to give teachers growth data. So if I wanted to look at some of those student groups that I created and make sure that they are increasing over time, I could do a cohort growth report. I could also look at student growth report. So let's say we're looking at these 2 assignments. And okay, this would be really depressing. We're going to change the order of this demo to make this less sad looking. Um, okay, growth. Now, your teachers will not be doing that, but my demo was just looking a bit too depressing there. So I can see how much growth is happening by standard here. I can see it broken down by standard over assignments. I can look at this by standard or by student. So there is there is a lot of robust data in here. Um, I like to also highlight the questions report. I'll go ahead and highlight that from the admin level. Um, so if I so everything I was just showing you was from that teacher perspective, but let's say I wanted to see things from a district administrator perspective and looking at a questions report. Let's say I wanted to see, what was the average by school for each question. So on question one, I can see the district average was a 48. It was the highest at Slytherin and the lowest at Gryffindor. And so I can get that data by question. And then down here, I'm getting data broken down by question type. And again, this goes to that idea of identifying any technology barriers. So although this demo is showing like multiple choice is low, typically when we're working with teams, we're seeing that multiple choice is a really high proficiency. And when students are taking assessments, they're struggling more with some of these tech enhanced items, whether it be graphing, using those math keypads, or whether it's select text and drag and drop. And so this, if I notice that one type of question is particularly low, that's going to prompt me to think about, is this a depth of knowledge or a rigor problem that maybe, you know, my less rigorous questions, maybe multiple choices where they're selecting from options, maybe those ones are just a bit easier. And when I'm not giving them any prompting, we're really struggling. Or again, it could be the tech. I just didn't know how to drag and drop, or I didn't know what the fraction symbol was on the keypad. And also with an admin level report, everything that you find is you're going to have the option to deep dive. So I can dive in and then see for this school all of the classes versus the district average. And then I can deep dive into those classes. Um, and so, again, all of the data is going to give you that high level view, and you can drill down. And just to kind of highlight, I'm going to generate this report. Let's say I were looking at standards based performance across all classes in my district. I can dive in to a particular class to actually get down to that student level. And I can also pull up individual student reports to see what answers a student selected and what type of feedback is there. So again, you're going to always have that highest level view, but we want you to be able to investigate your data. And then quick note is that Edcite and Edcite schools, we take backing up student work very seriously. So every report comes with a saved answers history if you need to restore an earlier version, because I mean, it has definitely happened in third grade where we see like students delete their essays, where they like select all for formatting reasons and press the space bar and submit it blank. And so teachers can always go back into the saved answers history and restore the earlier version before the child deleted everything. Um, just something to point out. So, with the couple minutes that we have left, I just want to say with reports, again, we want reports to prompt an action. And so I feel pretty confident that we've covered, we've got standards, we've got question types, we've got answer choices, we've got a lot of areas covered. But then if we're going to talk real quick about the workflows, so, we've got aligned assessments, we've got actionable data, but how do we make this work across 20 campuses? Or how do I make this work across my 7 teachers? So we support schools and districts that are less than 500 students or more than 20,000 students. So we've worked with lots of different teams and can definitely support the different workflows. In terms of collaboration, all of your teachers are going to have access to a My Assignments and My Questions. When they go to My Assignments, it's going to look very similar to a Google Drive setup or OneDrive setup, where I've got Edcite Schools folders, and other teachers in my team can share assessments or questions with me. I can give comments, and there's that real collaboration piece. And again, this is good for private sharing. So if you have copyrighted content that you can't put into the public library, but you are allowed to use with your team, you can share it into the Edcite Schools folders. Common assessments, teams are able to lock an assessment and say, hey, I want other teachers on my team to give this, and I don't want anyone to be able to edit or customize it. So you have the option to lock content, and you can go ahead and put it into what we call our common assessment workflow, where I can share this with my colleagues, and then it's going to prompt them to assign it. And we're going to get that data on the back end. So the workflows allow for, a teacher assigned approach where teachers can kind of run this themselves, saying, oh, me and my colleagues are going to give this common assessment, and they organize independently. Or we've got a district distributed approach, which is where your admins actually schedule the assessments for teachers, and teachers are given an access code. So we've got both a teacher assigned approach or more of that admin or top down district distributed approach. Um, and then in terms of data sharing, you've got full control over who has access to what data. So if you want, let's say, department chairs to have access to the data of all of the teachers in their department, you can go ahead and do that. If you want special education teachers to have access to the students that they work with across all of their teachers and grade levels, you can go ahead and authorize that. By default, teachers have access to their students, and building principals have access to their buildings data, and district administrators have access to district level data. But again, we know, because we were teachers ourselves, that like sometimes people wear many hats, or sometimes you want to share in particular ways. So that's really flexible. A couple last things I'll say is that Edcite Schools is also the version that comes with text to speech, as I highlighted when I was showing Cedric Diggory. It comes with the lockdown browser. And it also comes with some of our advanced integrations. So if you've got, Clever, you want to do a Clever upload across your school or district, you can do that with Edcite Schools. If you are working with Canvas, we have an integration with them. And again, Edcite and Edcite Schools works really well with Google Classroom. So if you have any questions or would like a quote or some information about pricing, we do our pricing based on a per student and per campus basis. Uh, and we also are going to be offering some prorated pilots in the spring semester if your team is looking to try things out before making a decision for 2019-2020 school year. So definitely get in touch. We can get your teams up and running before the new semester, which, January, we see a massive increase in the number of people looking for assessment support. So definitely reach out, and thank you for tuning in.